South Africa, either through an omission, negligence, or an act of commission, is in violation of United Nations sanctions by selling gazelles to Libyan warlords. Whether it's a private individual, a rogue general, or the government itself, South Africa, by not enforcing the law and adherence to UN sanctions, is in violation of United Nations sanctions. Hello, folks. Welcome back. You know, it's interesting. It's only after a journalist or someone in social media uncovers something untoward happening in South Africa that suddenly the mainstream media, or more importantly, in this case, government officials begin to take notice of illicit activity taking place in South Africa. Now, I'm going to make a statement, which is an accurate statement. It'll be refuted by the government of South Africa, but it's an accurate statement provided this story, published in City Press today, the 12th of October, 2025, authored by Erica Gibson, provided the story is correct, then South Africa is in violation of United Nations restrictions. They're doing things that they're not allowed to do. They can try to dismiss the Lady R and the Aleutian flights that land at Waterkloof and at Uppington as well. The Americans have blacklisted that Russian company. We don't have to do that. Yeah, sure, you're a sovereign state. But you endlessly tell us how the world should be subordinate to the United Nations, which in itself is a joke. But nonetheless, do as I say, not as I do. Apparently, South African helicopters were smuggled to Libya in violation of United Nations sanctions via those Russian flights, according to Erica Gibson. The Russian IL-76 from Abakan Air that recently landed in Uppington and unloaded unknown cargo? Well, whether it was that plane or not, at least 4 Gazelle helicopters have been flown out of Lanseria aboard an IL-76 over a 2-month period, with false flight plans listing Jordan as the destination, while the helicopters apparently were intended to end up and have wound up in the hands of General Khalifa Haftar's rebel territory in Benghazi. Now, we've covered Haftar in the past. The Russian airline Abakan Air, blacklisted by the U.S. for supplying these weapons to Wagner and Afrika Korps, was involved in the operation, switching off transponders or deviating from official routes to evade detection. This is an explosive story by Erica Gibson. Does she have personal security? Who knows if South African officials could be involved in this? She may be in jeopardy. In South Africa, that is. Now, these exports violate United Nations sanctions against delivering military equipment to Haftar and have, according to Gibson, there's no evidence whatsoever that South African government officials inspected the cargo or prevent the transfer of these military helicopters. Wow. Russian charter flights used to transport helicopters from South Africa to the Libyan rebel area of Benghazi, controlled by General Khalifa Haftar, former ally of Muammar Gaddafi, but an opponent of the existing internationally recognized government. As I said, Abakan Air is blacklisted by the United States and most of Western Europe because it's involved in supplying Wagner in Africa and the Afrika Korps, and also because of its activities in supplying the Russian military. But the South African government has not blacklisted that company. Therefore, they allow them to land there, despite the fact that it doesn't exactly win friends in Washington. Now, after that report appeared in the press about this mysterious landing of an aircraft from Abakan Air at Uppington last week, and then subsequently went to Lanseria before taking off, South Africa's Transportation Department claimed that the IL-76 unloaded general cargo, helicopters, and acrobatic equipment, and that the company had previously obtained a legitimate foreign operator permit in South Africa. Yeah, okay, that really isn't the point. My goodness. So what about these 4 Gazelles? What evidence do we have of this? Well, City Press says they established that at least 4 Gazelles have been exported from South Africa over the past 2 months from Lanseria, north of Joburg, aboard IL-76s. In every case, the flight plans indicated the IL-76s would fly via Nairobi, with Amman in Jordan as the final destination. So that seems innocuous. Jordan is not an evil state, not involved in a terror, not involved in a conflict. But photos and videos on Libyan social media show how 4 of the Gazelles suddenly appeared in Libya 2 weeks ago, neatly performed a flyover in formation at an event in Benghazi. The most recent flight was an IL-76 from Transavia Export Airlines that landed in Lanseria on the 18th of September and took off again the next day at 2:48 p.m. It loaded 1 Gazelle, and an earlier flight took out 2 Gazelles. Now, South African registration numbers on the sides of the helicopters were covered with Libyan flag stickers. Helicopters are, however, still clearly recognizable due to the unique colors in which they're painted for camouflage. Now, here's another problem with illicitly selling gazelles to a warlord in Libya. These helicopters were sold by Britain and France on the condition that would not be resold or used again in military configuration or application. That's a normal way that this is done. Selling military hardware to another country typically means they can't transfer it without your approval or even destroy it without your approval. And things as innocuous as a Humvee pickup truck, a Bucky, military Bucky. We had that problem in Botswana. Was there? They sold their Humvees at public auction, which they're allowed to do, provided they have permission from the U.S. government, which they didn't, and that created a real problem. But this is going to be a serious problem with the British and French government potentially selling gazelles. South Africa, either through an omission, negligence, or an act of commission, is in violation of United Nations sanctions by selling gazelles to Libyan warlords. Whether it's a private individual, a rogue general, or the government itself, South Africa, by not enforcing the law and adherence to UN sanctions, is in violation of United Nations sanctions. Will we see calls for the government of South Africa to be sanctioned by the United Nations for this egregious violation? Probably not. People just look the other way at the United Nations. After all, South Africa is not a real country. It's not a developed country. It's not an evil white Western country. So they can do what they want to do and thumb their nose at the United Nations all day long. What say you, South Africa? Zanzi? What an explosive story Erica Gibson has uncovered here. Well done. Is investigative journalism making a comeback in South Africa? Well, there's always been a few legitimate journalists in South Africa. Sadly, there aren't many. Cheers.